Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long-term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first-of-its-kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast. Hey everybody, Mark and Steve here again. Good to be with you guys this week. We are today we're going to be covering part 2 of a kind of mini series of sorts that we've been doing in terms of talking about developing trust or bringing trust back into a relationship following betrayal. And this, as we talked about last time, is something that we usually address and talk about once each individual has gotten a solid footing in their own recovery. That is definitely a prerequisite to what we're going to be talking about today. But last week we talked about from a spouse's perspective, how to get back to a place of trusting you guys, the addicts, of getting back to a place of wanting to invest and being able to choose to invest in the relationship again. And today we're going to talk about the other side of the coin. We're going to spend most of our time today talking about how do you regain her trust, things that you can be doing, things that you can be handling and taking ownership of on your end in that part of the process. But then also addressing a little bit of how do you get to a place where you can trust the relationship again? Obviously, your reasons for not trusting it are going to be very different than your spouse's in some cases, but we're going to talk about that as well. So I'm actually really excited to jump into this. I feel a little more comfortable always, Mark, in talking about this from the addict side, just because having been there myself, right?
Yeah.
And like always, guys, we're going to keep this as raw and real today as we can. Recognizing that these are difficult issues and difficult things to tackle. But with that in mind, we'll jump right into it. Mark, you want to do the honors, or you want me to hit this?
Yeah, let's talk about this first part. Because to me, it's a part that we as guys can really get our arms around, because we love to fix things. We love to get into solutions and to answers and go into that mode. Well, one of the very best ways that I know in order to start to regain your wife's trust is to let her see that you're actually doing the work of recovery. Now, I'm going to say that with a really important caveat. It's also easy for the man brain to get into the place where we can have an attitude toward recovery that is check the boxes.
Yes.
And when we check the boxes and we do all the things that we know she's expecting us to do. And here's the danger of that. Well, it's a double danger. Well, number one is if that's my main motivation for being involved with recovery, it's not going to succeed. Yeah. Well, I'm going to make sure she sees that I'm doing the right things. And so then she'll trust me again. And then I can go and do what I really want.
Sure.
So we get into that place. And the other side of that is if I get into this place of just checking the boxes, then I'm not really getting into the deep, deep core of my own issues. right? If it's all
Yeah.
about being seen doing the right things, and that's different from what I'm doing in my heart and my soul behind the scenes. What am I doing when she's not looking? What am
Yeah.
I doing when it's not, to check the boxes, so to speak? And so as we talk about what to do, it's really important that you check your intention at the door. What is my intention through all of this? Am I really, truly engaged fully in doing this for my healing, for my recovery, for my becoming a new man, right? Right from the inside out. And I
Yes.
can't stress that enough because man, did I go through the motions of recovery for years and years and years. Well, but I'm doing all the right things, right? So now here comes the impatience. So if she suddenly doesn't start to comply with what I expect should have happened because I was, quote, doing the right things, well, I've been doing all these things. Look, check, 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 check. And you're still not giving me sex when I want it.
Sure.
So that's the other side that becomes dangerous in this is if I'm doing this in order to get her to behave a certain way, I'm missing the whole point of my own recovery and my own healing.
Mark brings up a great point there, and just we love getting real on this podcast. Those who are longtime listeners know this, and so I say what I'm going to say next with all the love and empathy for you guys in the world as fellow recovering addicts. If you're not at a point in your recovery where you can be sincere about really developing and creating a trusting relationship with your spouse, if you're still in a place of wanting to posture, like Mark said, or just check the boxes, do yourself and your wife a favor and skip this podcast episode, because it's not going to do you or your wife any good. And honestly, I could see it doing a lot of bad,
Mhm.
because if you show up and you are doing this from a strictly check the box place like Mark is talking about, and you don't have the emotional chops to back up what you're selling, you know what you've just done? You've just complicated her grief and her trauma even more, and you've set yourself and the relationship behind an even bigger eight ball, sometimes in a way that more so than when you started.
Well, the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to resent me and Steve deeply and never listen to this podcast ever again.
Those guys told me to do these things. I did them, damn it, and they didn't work.
No, you
That's
make a
right.
great point, Steve. If guys who are listening are really kind of feeling a little bit pricked in their conscience that, wow, was checking the box, going through the motions, trying to do things so my wife will, give me what I want. If you're feeling any of that, doesn't mean you're a bad guy. We've both been there.
Of course,
Believe me, I was
absolutely.
there. I was there for decades. I'm not
Yeah,
exaggerating. Decades. But you may want to go back and look at some of the earlier episodes about what it takes to get into the place of recovery. How do you
correct.
start that process? How do you even be open to it? What does it look like? This is pretty advanced work that we're doing right now with regard to a relationship. So you make a good point, Steve. Just be sensitive to that, guys.
Well, and Mark is much better at putting it diplomatically. I'm really good at drawing bloodlines in the sand. So um, a little bit of that wife empathy coming out. But really, guys, I do mean that from an honest place of love. I mean, it really will be the best thing for you and your partner to wait on this stuff until you're really in a headspace to really commit yourself to it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll delay the process. It'll hurt her more, and it will serve you in all sorts of negative ways.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's a great point. And thanks, Mark, for the more
Yeah.
loving
So
version of that.
if we start to talk about just some of the simple do's, and there's lots and lots and lots of these, but some of the basic guys, I can just tell you, having been married, really going on almost 40 years now, and working with so many women over the years, if we want to be really blunt, there's no bigger turn on for a woman than a man who knows how to be vulnerable and honest and transparent and to just really express his true self, right? Intimacy. Into me you see. And
Yeah,
that's why Steve and I harp on this thing called daily emotional check-ins with your spouse. A chance to get raw and real with her and really express to her what's really going on with you, as deep as you can go. And when I first tried this, that wasn't deep. It was about a quarter of an inch.
sure.
And I learned over time, right? It was what do you mean feelings? Mad, sad, glad. Okay, I'm gonna tell my wife if I was mad, sad, or glad today. And I had to
Yeah.
learn how to yeah, how to even navigate the space of what it means to start to share deep feelings. But that's a big to do in restoring trust. Is my husband being open, vulnerable, transparent, honest? Is he just telling me like it is?
Yeah.
Huge.
Oh, I could not agree more with that statement. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what we're really talking about here, right, at the end of the day is trust absolutely requires, guys, consistency at the bottom line.
Yeah.
That underlines the whole process. One of the biggest mistakes I see guys make in this specific dynamic of recovery, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, where you got to make sure you're really committed to this process, is when you show up and you do this for a week and then you burn out and quit, and then you show up again and then you quit, and then you know that you obviously it's good to be trying and making that effort, but as quickly as you can, it's critical to be developing that consistency, so that, because that is the base that all the other stuff we're going to talk about today kind of forms from. If she can't depend on you to follow through on what you say you're going to do, you're you're toast in this business.
And that's one of the biggest complaints that I hear from wives and from my own wife, you know, in over the years is, okay, this is great that you're doing all these wonderful things, and I can see that you're trying. But if I look at past history, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop when you stop doing these things.
Yep.
When you're the
Absolutely.
racehorse out of the gate, you run around the track all impressive, and everybody's going, "Ooh, ah, look at him! Wow, he's so flashy and racy and impressive."
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing I know is you're dead on the track, and you've gone
Yes.
back to old behaviors.
Well, and that really does go back to what Mark had kind of alluded to a second ago. Guys, patience here is really critical. I was joking with Mark before we recorded this thing, and I've heard this from countless clients, but I was guilty of this multiple times. As I was going through this process, I remember a couple of conversations where my wife and I would be having a conversation about this, and she would bring up something specifically like, "Oh, look, I need you to be patient with me." And like I'd be all escalated and defensive, right? And like insistent, because I was rigid in my thinking about how this process should be happening and progressing. I wasn't letting it flow the way it should. And I remember her saying, "Look, I need you to be patient with me." And me sitting there like bowing my arms, like getting like, and then aggressively saying, "Okay, I'm patient. All right. I'm being patient. Look, that's what you wanted, right? I'm being patient now."
I know. It's so
And I think most
nice.
guys can kind of relate to that, because and being patient really does mean just that, guys. If you're telling your, if you can't get caught in that pattern of saying you're being patient, but again, not backing it up emotionally. If you're saying you're patient, but you're pandering your wife for sex 3 times a day, I got news for you. You're not being patient. If you're
Well,
being, you
and the
know,
other side of that patience factor is we as guys, we like to get into this place of forcing outcomes. We
of
have
course.
expectations and we want them to unfold the way we want in the time frame we want. So it's really easy to get to the place where we want to make our wives trust us.
Hmm.
I'm going to make her trust me. And I'm going to do that by doing these 9 boxes that I'm going to check each day. And damn it, by the time I'm done with that, she's going to trust me.
Yes.
And the problem with that is, first of all, it doesn't work. Right? You can't make anybody do anything. But the other part is when it doesn't, when the outcome isn't unfolding the way I expect by trying to force it, then I get into this place where I start pressuring. I start
Yes.
pressuring her in little subtle ways in order to, we're not making progress on this trust path the way I expect. So I'm going to start doing little things to pressure you to hurry this trust restoration process. And then what can easily happen is when I start that process, now I can get into this place of neediness,
Hmm.
right? You're
Yes.
not trusting me, man. Dang, I've done all these things and you're just not trusting me. And so now I can start to get back into demands and kind of
Hmm.
being whiny or dominant. Right now I'm out. Now I've just left the recovery track.
Yes.
I'm off in Addictville now
Yeah.
because you weren't meeting my time frame or my expectations for the restoration of trust. That's a
Yes.
hard thing for us as guys. Oh my gosh, we can get angry and resentful and impatient and mad. It's like,
Yes.
this is, come on, right? Snapping the fingers. When is this? Come on, let's get on with this. I mean, I've been sober for a month now. Can we put this behind us?
Sure. Oh yeah, sure, hon. Yeah, you've 2 decades of betrayal, and you've been sober for a month now. You're absolutely right. What was
Yep.
I thinking? Right? We joke about this only because it's so true.
Mm.
But I like where you're going with that, Mark, because and this is an important piece to note, guys. Can't emphasize this enough. If you take nothing else away from this section of the podcast, please take this. Real patience is a natural outgrowth of solid recovery.
Oh yeah.
Always.
Yep.
If I'm in a good place and I'm working my program, if I'm engaged in, 12 step right out the gate, step 1 tells me what? One day at a time. That implies a lot of different things, but among those things is, it is literally a one day at a time thing. Where are we at today? And being able to be present and recognize and sit in where we're at today, as opposed to constantly pressuring for something different,
Mm.
actively engaging in recovery now. If you are not living in the moment today, I would argue that something is off with your recovery. We as addicts, and this happens in trauma victims as well, tend to live in two places primarily. One is in the past, and we look at it through the lens of shame and regret and hopelessness and all of those other things. And then the second one is the future, where we need to be, where we have to be, where we should be, where this marriage should be, where it should. And the reality is, guys, is recovery doesn't happen in either one of those spaces. Those are both good to reference, but recovery happens in the now, in the today. And if you're going to really be that support for your spouse, you have to honor what is a fundamental, and I would argue eternal spiritual truth, is that your wife has her own agency. Choice, we're going to talk about this in just a minute, but trust, her choosing to trust you again is a choice. It's not something that you can make her do. You have to let go of that idea. And I understand that there's oftentimes even a really good desire behind that. I know what it's like to be a husband, to be able to want to just give anything and everything to just make this relationship better. And I don't question that sincerity, but you have to recognize that it has to happen on her terms. Her recovery has to happen on her terms. And the more you force it, the more you push it, kind of like with my, hey, I'm being patient now, right? Example. The more you try to push it or pressure it, the longer you will actually develop out that trust. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from wives who will talk about this very thing. And they'll say, hey, we're building, like we're trying to work on this and we're trying to make changes. And he keeps telling me things like, hey, he's patient, but then he asks me for sex 3 times a day, or he's emotionally needy, right? He's kind of following me around almost like an emotional puppy dog. He's looking to me to still make him feel better, to still make him enough. And if you're caught in that place, guys, and obviously that could just be a perception, but if you're legitimately in that place, something is off in your recovery. It just is. And there needs to be a dramatic shift, because a person who is in solid recovery is going to want change in their marriage. They're going to desire to see that shift. They're going to be hoping for it and doing everything they can on their side, but they are going to let it happen as it happens.
Yeah, and it's really a shift in your way of thinking,
Yes.
because the only thing that I can do to help her restore her trust is to work on my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but focusing on you guys and your daily recovery healing work consistently, day in and day out, is the only thing that you can do in order to have the hope of trust restored. It's
Absolutely.
focusing on her. It's not even focusing on the relationship. It's focusing on you.
Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of different forms. It reminds me of a discussion I had with a client just recently. Was working with a couple where the dynamic, there were a lot of dynamics going on, as is always the case. But one of the dynamics going on was we had talked about check-ins a couple of weeks prior, right? And the importance of those in the marriage. Well, uh, his spouse, his wife, because of where she was at in her recovery and actions that he had taken, and their past and everything else, was not in a place yet to be able to take those check-ins, right? And
Mm,
to do those with him. And he came to
yeah.
me in therapy kind of with the excuse of, well, no, Steve, I didn't do the check-ins, but she didn't want me to.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what your response should have been? If we go back and redo this, and if we're looking forward, your response ought to be, I can totally respect the fact that you don't want to check in for me. I just want you to know that I am going to write them every single night. And if or when you get to a place where you want me to share those with you, I will. It's demonstrating that idea of I'm going to respect your boundaries, but that is not going to shift my recovery process. At the end of the day, recovery has to be for me. It's one of those weird ironies of recovery, guys. The more you do recovery for you, the more you do it for the marriage. It sounds bizarre. It doesn't make sense, but it's the truth.
Hey, everybody, Mark and Steve here. Are you looking to take your recovery and your marriage to the next level?
We work with individuals and couples one-on-one.
With both in-person and online therapy options, you have access to the experts anytime, anywhere.
To learn more, visit us at pbscpodcast.com.
So true. So true, right? Again, it comes from motivation. What's moving you in this process? And if it's reliant on her mood, whether she responds properly, whether you're getting the
Yes.
outcome that you want, your recovery is going to be a mess because she's human. She's not going to be in
Yes.
a totally perfect place that you want her each day. It's going to go up and down and all around. And if that's what you're basing your motivation to keep moving forward on, right, you're in
Yes.
trouble. And I remember
Absolutely.
that. I remember that codependent, needy state that if my wife was in a good place, I was in a good place. If she
Totally.
was in a bad place, I was in a bad place. Right?
Yeah.
If she's doing good, I'm doing good in recovery. If she's not, well, forget all this. I'm going to go relapse.
Absolutely. It's so true. And it is important to keep in mind, guys, as you're going through this process, that it is going to be one where you have to let go of whatever preconceived notions you have about how it's going to play out.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
And it's so hard because it's human nature, but especially for us addicts, it's human nature for us. It's our addiction's nature to want to try and control our environment as a way to create our own safety. But the way that safety is created internally comes from that spiritual relationship we relate to so much here, which kind of is going to take us into a concept that we're going to talk about on the other side of the coin, which is how do I trust her and trust the relationship again. The less you need this relationship with your wife, the more you'll be able to show up in it the way she needs you to. Again, another really weird irony.
What?
Your wife, what? because at the end of the day, again, think of it from your wife's perspective for a moment. If you're saying that you're going to do all these things, hey, I'm going to show up for you, I'm going to be consistent for you, or I'm going to be whatever, and she has a trauma response one day or needs space or whatever, and you just go all to pieces and quit, what have you just done? You have just confirmed for her every single fear she has about trusting you in the first place. And
Well,
many of you guys have probably heard that, right? I've had wives who actually said that. See what you just did right there? That is the very thing that I was worried about. I knew that was going to happen.
and the problem with that is double, because it's going to confirm to her that her worst fears are true.
Yes.
I can't trust him to be consistent. He falls apart, da 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 da. But that also says to her that she can't be honest and open and vulnerable and transparent in her own healing, because if she does, he falls apart.
Yep.
And so now you've just pulled her out of her healing from betrayal trauma.
So yes, and I can tell you hands down, in 10 years of doing this, I have yet to ever once have a spouse come to me and say, oh my gosh, he was acting in the ways that we just talked about. Man, I just trust him so much now. Right? Like I'm just so into this relationship now. Right? Like it just doesn't work. It's again, it's not about right or wrong, guys. It's about helping you, not to shoot yourself in the foot. There is no need here to reinvent the wheel. Mark and I already did that. So you don't have to repeat it. So
well, and also, guys, let us be clear. We get really passionate and excited when we talk about this because we have our own histories, and we want to save you. See, listen to my wording. I want to save all of you from your own pain as much as I can. Yeah, that's flawed right there. But we do want to try to say, hey, if we can help you, take a better path by our mistakes, please do so. but we understand that this isn't going to be perfect. And some of the things we're saying, hey, when you do this, and then your wife responds like that, how dumb that is. Well,
Mhm.
we've done all those things. And we know
Yeah.
that you're going to have days where you kind of fall off the track a bit. And you're going to go,
Yeah.
man, how did I do that? Now she's back in her trauma and I'm off of my recovery.
Totally.
And the great part about this is you can always immediately or as quick as you can turn around, get back up, get back in sync and start trying again and trying again and trying again. We are big believers in I was going to say you get as many do-overs as you need. That might not be true. I mean, some relationships can only go so far, but you get a lot of do-overs, right? There's
Sure.
grace. Um, there's
Yeah.
there's patience and love to be had there. So please don't take these things we say as Nazi declarations that you've screwed up so bad you're done.
Of course.
There's always the ability to start tomorrow and try again.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I'm watching our time, so we're gonna have to speed
I
this up a
know
little
we
bit
are.
here.
So
So yeah, the
how do I trust her and the relationship?
yes. Now I'm gonna say one more thing about that last segment before we move in because it came to mind and it is important. We don't have time to get into it too much, but guys, it's absolutely critical that you be getting a grasp and a therapist is probably your best go-to and starting to work on this. But getting a grasp on your own shame and your own shame responses is critical to
Mm,
be able to do what we talked about above.
oh yeah.
It will sabotage you at every turn. If like Mark was kind of alluding to, and that's really what we've been talking about a little bit is that shame factor. You have to have. You'll never. None of us, according to Brene Brown, who I love, and the research holds true to this, will ever be 100% shame free. But you have to have an accurate accounting for it and have an accurate or have a good hold on it. Because if it's running and regulating you, it'll undermine all of your other efforts. So
Yeah, if you're doing shame responses with regard to your own recovery and your wife and your marriage, it's just going to sabotage nearly everything you try to do with this.
yes.
Steve's right.
Now, in this next segment, okay, so how do I trust her? This is going to be a little bit briefer, and the reason why is because we covered these pretty in depth from the spouse's perspective last week, and so again, we're going to reference you back to that same podcast. The ones that we go over more quickly are going to be largely they're going to largely resonate on the other side of the coin. It'll be for different reasons, but the concepts remain true. So, if you were looking for more insight into these, please reference that and if you still have questions about it, obviously let us know. Reach out to us at pbsc or pbscpodcast.com, and we're happy to go into these more in depth if you feel it'd be helpful. So a couple steps here. The first off is being willing and able to validate your own pain and shame in this quest to be able to trust her again. Now that does sound a little bit odd, but the long and short of that is if all of us guys, we operate under a shame mentality like we were just talking to in this process, at least in early recovery, if not through much of it. And I can only speak to myself and Mark, but if you're operating, for example, from a place of where there's a part of your brain that's already kind of decided that this marriage is going to end no matter what, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when, that is going to show up and undermine you being able to trust her again. You're not going to be able to invest in something that you are convinced on some level that is going to be over in a year. And so being able to recognize and validate and then work on that your own pain and your own shame. All of us addicts, I have yet to meet a single addict in my entire life who did not deal with abandonment issues of some sort. We all have a fear of abandonment. Oftentimes that comes from prior relationships and interactions, but if nothing else, from that constant fear that we live in. And so if you're going to trust her, what we're really saying is in a lot of ways, you've got to be able to trust yourself first on that side of it. Any thoughts to add to that, Mark?
No, I think that's true. If I get into a place where I can't get in touch with my own pain and my own shame, then it's going to be really difficult for me to trust her or trust anyone.
Yes.
I just found in my own life that my ability I developed such a cynicism, such
Mm-hmm.
a pessimism about relationships and outcomes and anything being able to be good or some good enjoyable happy outcome. I got to the place where I said that's never going to happen for me. Stuff
Yeah.
always goes to crap. And you get into this place where you have that deep shame and pain inside of you, and one of your protections is just to assume the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be really hard in a relationship if that's what you're doing. I
Yes.
know that she's never going to accept me. She's never going to let this go. The past, I've had guys say to me, Mark, my past is always going to haunt our marriage for the rest of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
how is it ever going to get better? She's never going to let this go.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so true. When, like I said, I wish we had a whole podcast for a lot of these
I
topics,
know,
but
right?
and please do let us know if you guys would like more information about this. And obviously, you're always welcome to reach out. We'd love to take on new clients and work with you guys individually. Second step here in that process or concept is letting go of the shoulds about how
Mhm.
and when to trust. Right, just like we were talking about before, of letting go of those shoulds with your relationship with your wife and letting go of her process. It's important that you do that with yourself as well. Navigating this, it is something that we should be actively working towards every day, but you can't put a time frame on this. It should, if you're processing through it, you will make progress with this pretty quickly. But just like spouses oftentimes operate under a lot of shoulds and should I trust him again? Should I not? Should I divorce him again? Should I not? You know, addicts operate under a lot of those same things, and oftentimes they're more shame based, right? Mark, you said something really good before this podcast and vocalized it perfectly. Addicts have a really hard time seeing how they can even how they're even quote unquote worthy or deserving of having pain. Well, I caused so much pain to my wife, right? And so many issues here. I don't even have a right to feel pain or
Yeah.
feel these things or whatever the case is. And just because a wife's trauma response might be justifiable in terms of the mentality and where it comes from, and this kind of bleeds into the next point as well, you still have to let your partner own her actions. At the end of the day, you cannot take ownership of her, not just her recovery, her recovery, but her negative responses to you. Even though you may play a role in those things, either you handling something poorly or just an overall role in the trauma, which is absolutely true. Only she can make the changes around those things that are going to benefit the relationship. And so you need to let her own that.
Yeah. Yeah, letting go of, when she should trust me, how long it's going to take, all the things I need to be doing, and just putting all sorts of requirements on that. I like to say it takes what it takes.
Yes.
And you don't know what that is right now. You may never know exactly what that is. All you can do is just keep trying and doing the things that are a part of a healthy recovery and healing. Just keep at it each day and let it unfold. Let it unfold as it needs to.
Yes.
That's the trust. If we start to talk about the trust in this whole topic, it's trusting the process.
Yes.
It's trusting that it will unfold as it needs to and can. That doesn't mean that the outcome will be exactly what I hoped for. Maybe it won't match my ideal outcome, but it still needs to unfold and do what it does. And I
Yes.
can only do what I can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I completely agree with that, and that does take us to some of our final points here. The first one is that choosing to trust again, guys, either yourself or the relationship is a choice, and it's
Mm,
important to own that and to recognize that because too often I see both spouses of addicts as well as addicts get caught in a dynamic almost without realizing it of they're kind of waiting for someone or something to come along and say, okay, now trust him or trust her. And at the end of the day, um, my partner does have a responsibility to be doing everything they can on their end to provide safety in the relationship, to provide consistency on their end of recovery, to be able to be accountable for past actions, past hurts, past wrongs, all of those things. But there is no way for your wife, there is not a single thing she could say or do that will ever be the thing of like, oh, okay, well, now I trust you. It's something you're going to have to choose. And so being able to take ownership of that is, on the one hand, kind of frustrating, but also hopefully you find it liberating because that puts you in the driver's seat of being able to. Because what we're talking about here isn't just how do I trust her again. What we're talking about is how do I fully invest in this relationship again? How do I go all in again? Right? That's the bigger concept going on here, and that, like Mark has indicated, has to happen on your terms.
yeah, because if we start to talk about the very way that our brains are wired with regard to addiction, we hopefully can come to the place where we can recognize that I have a tendency to go to these negative paradigms that, right, that this isn't going to work. What if this doesn't all turn out? What if I put in all this effort and it doesn't turn out?
Yeah.
And we can get lost in what ifs. What if, what
Hmm.
if, what if, what if? And the big challenge with that is it prevents me, if I spend time there, it prevents me from giving myself to the thing which I do have power over, which are my decisions right now. Am I working recovery right now in this moment? Am I doing what I can today?
Yeah.
Not because I want, because a certain outcome has to happen, but simply because it's the right thing for me to do, for my
Yes.
happiness, for my healing, for my self-confidence, for my possibilities. I'm just going to do that regardless. And if I'll do that, if I'll trust that process, then that's the best chance that the relationship has. That's the
Absolutely.
very best chance. Not obsessing over whether it's going to work, not, becoming impatient and angry because she's not doing the things I hope she would do by when I hope she would do them. I'm just going to work my process.
Yes.
Just let it unfold.
Guys, I guess we'll wrap up with that. A couple of just kind of key thoughts before we give you something to work on this week. One is take all that energy, or do your best to take that energy that you're putting into trying to change the outcome and put it into the effort of making the changing yourself.
Yeah,
The,
there you
the
go.
more you're able to do that, the better off you and the marriage are going to be, and the more quickly the relationship is going to heal and change in the ways that it needs to.
Yep.
Um, with regard to an assignment for this week, before that, I just want to say that, we have so much empathy for you guys. I know that sometimes we talk about this stuff casually on here, and hopefully that matter of fact approach resonates with most of you. You have to laugh at some of these parts of recovery because they're so hard and they're so painful and they're so difficult. Laughter is a good motivator, but we do recognize and honor this is a serious process, and you guys have a lot going on, and there's a lot of moving parts. If you find yourself, and we would strongly encourage you to do this even if you're not yet seeing it, but please do get in touch with a good therapist. Mark and I both have options virtually or in person for that, and we can discuss those with you if you're interested. If you're looking for somebody that's in person and not close to us, let us know, and we can give you some direction there as well. At the end of the day, we just want you and your spouse to be successful in this process and get back to a good place. So
Yep. Well, what's our takeaway for these guys? What
it's a
uh, what
great
are we what are we going to have them do?
great question. If it was me, I would go back and actually repeat an assignment we had these guys do at the beginning of like one of our first episodes. I would go through and I would start making a list of the things all the things in recovery that are bothering you or frustrating you, or maybe not even bothering or frustrating, but just weigh on you in your mind. And I would have you list all those in detail, be specific in one column, and then in another column, either in an Excel sheet or just on paper, I would ask the question and answer yes or no or partially to the following. Is this something that I can control and change? For all those things that you're not able to control, then you go ahead and you draw a big red line through each of those, and those, where those go on your surrender list of things to give away to your higher power in your 12-step process. And that's something we've talked about before as well. Those are things that need to be given away because we can't do anything with them. But then that last piece for those answers that are either a maybe or partially I can help control or change this, or yes, it is within my control. Make a list of one thing that you can do to step up your game on that thing, to change it, to make it a little bit better. One way in which you can be more patient, and not do it the Steve way of, hey, I'm patient now. One more way in which you can, one way in which you can step up your game of holding space for your partner, or expressing empathy for her, being accountable for your past actions. If you go there, I guarantee good things will happen.
Yeah, I love that. So just a list of all the stuff with regard to addiction or recovery or relationship that's weighing on your mind that, occupies your thoughts. List them all out. And the ones you can't do anything about, you cross them out and let them go. You just let go and let God. And then those that you feel you can do something about, start to look at those and then pick a few to start
Yes,
working on today, right?
absolutely.
One little step at a time.
Absolutely. Awesome, guys. Well, hey, thanks as always for joining us. It's always a pleasure for you guys to be here with us. And please do visit us if you've got questions or concerns or just feedback about the podcast in general at pbscpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week, everybody.
Yep. See you next time. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Together, we can do the impossible.
To learn more about Mark and Steve and to listen to more podcast episodes, visit us at pbscpodcast.com. Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.